All right, so my first training video. So this video is going to be on my upper back focused pull session that I did probably a couple days ago now at Brickhaus Fitness. You're gonna have to ignore this beginning part here. I tried to get some like B-roll footage of where I'm walking into the gym and like recording all the machines and all that stuff, but that was super strange. So I decided to throw it in anyways, just for some B-roll footage. Anyways. All right, so first things first, even though this is a pull session and I'm focusing on back, specifically upper back in this session, I am starting with biceps. And the reason why I'm doing that is because my biceps specifically are probably the most lagging body part on my upper body. And so I'm obviously starting with the bicep work to help prioritize them. If you guys are familiar with the priority principle within training, whatever we do first within the training session is going to be what we are prioritizing. Now, normally I wouldn't recommend doing some sort of like a single joint isolation movement before you get into your heavy compound movements. But I found that doing bicep work before I get into my compound rowing movements or whatever movements I'm doing for that day, it doesn't take away from the strength that I can use on them. So for example, like on a chest day, I would never walk in the gym and do cable flies before I did like say a bench press or something, because I would be exhausting my chest on the cable fly, and that's going to take away from the amount of weight and the amount of reps that I can get with that weight when I get into the compound movement. And the compound movements should really be your major focus just because they're the most bang for your buck. But with my pull sessions, doing bicep work first, it never takes away from what I can do on my compound movements. So I just do 3 sets here. I'm using a cable curl, and I'm using this bilaterally, so I'm using both arms at the same time here. We're going to get into a different variation of this later on in the session. But what I'm doing with my cable curls, as you're seeing here in the descriptions, I'm leaving reps in reserve. So that's what the RIR stands for. It means reps in reserve. What it just means is if I'm at a 1 RIR, that means I stop the set with 1 rep in the tank, hypothetically. I only had about 1 good rep left. I prefer to use reps in reserve instead of RPE, or rate of preserved exertion. I just think that RIR is a more accurate way to track the intensity of a set. So I'm just doing 3 sets here. My first 2 sets, I'm leaving a rep in the tank, and then my final set, I am taking all the way to either failure, or what happens in this case with 0 RIR is I do my last rep, and I know that there's no way that I can get another rep after that, so the set is over. So what I'm aiming for over these 3 sets here is I'm aiming for 15 reps across all 3 sets. So today I did 16 on the first set, 15 on the second set, and then 16 on the final set here. So what I'm going to do next week is I'm using 20 pounds on the cable curl in this example. Next week I'm going to take the 2.5 pound plate that you would put on a barbell, and I'm going to clip that onto the pin stack. So I'm going to go up in weight by just a small amount, 2.5 pounds. And I'm going to continue to stick with that method as I get stronger and stronger on my bicep curls. So the first compound movement is going to be a chest-supported T-bar row. I put my warm-up sets in here because I want to emphasize how I'm warming up for my working sets here on the T-bar row. So what I'm working up to on this particular compound movement is I'm working up into 2 working sets. My first set is going to be a failure set, aiming to fail between 5 and 8 reps. So that's what I call a loading set. I'm trying to move the heaviest amount of weight possible. Then after that set, I'm going to reduce the weight, and I'm going to do what I call a back-off set. And the back-off set is going to be the same thing to failure, anywhere between 10 and 15 reps. So because I have a logbook, and I know that last week I did 115 pounds for 10 reps, I knew that this week I wanted to do 120 pounds. So now that I know what weight I'm going to be working with on my top set, I can plan my warm-up sets methodically according to that. So what you're going to notice is as the weight goes up in my warm-ups, my reps go down. And the point of that is that I'm not doing so much work in my warm-up sets that I fatigue myself for the working sets, and I take away from the amount of reps and weight that I can get with those working sets. because the goal of those working sets is to progressively overload from what I did the week before. And so I don't want to waste too much energy on my warm-ups. I want to be able to save all of my energy for my working sets so that I can progressively overload and get stronger and create a novel stimulus and cause my body to adapt and build new muscle. So here's my loading set, 120 pounds. I did 9 reps this week. So next week, I'm gonna add another 5 pounds to this and I'm gonna go for 125. And I'm literally just gonna repeat this cycle of trying to get stronger and stronger on these movements until I hit a plateau. From then, I'll either switch the movement out or I'll deload, and that's kind of depending all on my training stimulus as a whole. If it's just this movement that plateaus, then I'll just swap the movement. But if everything is plateauing, then I'll start to take a deload period. So that was obviously 9 reps. That was outside of the 5 to 8 rep range. So I'm going to be adding weight next week. And here, this is 77.5 pounds. I do 15 reps, which is obviously at the upper limit of the rep range again. So next week, I'm going to be adding 2.5 pounds to this. So I'll be doing 80 pounds next week, trying to do the same thing here. What you're going to notice on my chest-supported T-bar rows is if you watch my scapula, I fully open the scapula on the pad. So as I come down there, I fully open, let my upper back stretch, and then I contract as hard as I can. Trying to keep my chest on the pad for as long as I can and as much as I can to get the most activation out of my upper back here. I don't want any cheating when I'm doing this movement. So after my 2 working sets on the chest-supported T-bar row, I get into rack deads, which is going to be my second compound movement that's focused on the upper back. Again, my upper back is already really warmed up after all of those sets that I did of the chest-supported T-bar row, so I don't need to go crazy on my warm-ups here. I'm just taking these in 1 or 2 reps as I work up to what weight that I'm going to use. Again, just to save energy so I can get the most amount of reps that I can out of my working sets. So in this particular case, you're going to notice that I'm doing rack deads at about knee height, maybe even slightly above. There's a couple reasons for that. One, I understand that doing rack deads at this height may not be the most optimal thing. I would assume that the most optimal thing would be doing deadlifts from the floor. But about 2 years ago, I suffered a lower back injury from deadlifting. And so at this point in my, I guess you could call it lifting career journey, whatever you want to say it, like deadlifting from the floor is not an option for me. Every time that I get back into doing it, I get rolling for a couple weeks and then something happens and I end up re-injuring myself. So by keeping a higher focus on the rack pull here, I'm doing 2 things. 1, I'm saving my lower back, and 2, I am saving my hamstrings. I train with a push-pull leg split, and if I go too low on the bar, like the bar is mid-shin or the bar is on the ground, I wake up the next morning and my hamstrings are absolutely fried, which is good, right? But it would be, it's actually a disadvantage to me because I train legs the day after I train pull. So if I'm waking up on the day that I'm training legs and my hamstrings are fried, that's going to affect my leg session. So I keep the pin height a little bit higher to save my hamstrings and save my lower back. If you go back a couple reps, on some of these warm-up sets, you're going to see that I'm really focused on rolling my scapula all the way back and all the way forward, and I'm perfectly controlling these reps all the way down. Rack deadlifts are a movement that notoriously you see people in the gym, they just bounce the weight off the pins, bounce the weight, and they're just focused on moving weight and not really contracting anything in their upper back. I'm focused solely on contracting my upper back, my traps, my rhomboid area, and controlling the eccentric all the way down. I never once bounce the weight off the pins. I actually come to a dead stop on the pins to eliminate all momentum and make the movement harder for myself. All right, so even though this is an upper back focused pull session, I still do include some lat movements. Just one lat movement in this particular case. This is an assisted chin-up station, and I have a pair of D handles that are attached to it. I've made a couple Instagram posts about the D handles and how much I really enjoy these, particularly on a movement like this, like an assisted chin-up. I really like the D handles because it allows my wrists to swivel and it allows my wrist to turn. And what I notice on an assisted chin up, if I don't use these D handles, is my elbows get absolutely fried. So I have what I would describe as a mild case, or a minor case, I guess you could say, of tendonitis in my elbows, specifically my left elbow. And if I don't use these D handles here, my elbows get absolutely fried. So by using the D handles, not only can I save my elbows, I can actually get really much stronger lat contractions. If you notice at the top of the movement, I'm turning the handles like slightly inward. So it's not a full supination on the grip, but it's kind of like a semi-supination. So it's like half underhand grip, and that allows me to get a really strong contraction on my lats here. You'll notice it's kind of hard to see from this angle. On my third set, the angle is all the way from the back. You're going to see that I fully let my scapula open up, and then I depress my scapula to initiate the movement. And what I'm focusing on in this movement is driving my humerus as close to the base of my spine as I can to fully shorten that lat as best as I can. Now this is a movement, I'm not training to failure on these with the exception of the last set. This is going to kind of be a similar, I guess you could say, rep and set scheme to my bicep work, where I'm doing 3 sets here, leaving a rep in the tank in the first 2 sets, and then going to failure on my last set, because I'm trying to accumulate volume with this movement, not necessarily generate intensity. I've generated enough intensity on the 2 sets of the T-bar and the 2 sets of the deadlift that really doing any more super intense work at this point in the session is just going to fry my central nervous system, and it's going to affect my recovery. So at this point, I'm just focused on doing like the stretchy, squeezy stuff and accumulating a lot of volume, especially for the back. The back is a body part that can really handle a lot of volume. And when I see people that are kind of like too far into this low volume, progressive overload style of training, they tend to go lower on the volume than what they can actually handle. So to give a general idea, in this particular back session, I do 9 working sets of back. I do 2 working sets on the T-bar, 2 working sets on the deadlift, 3 working sets here, and then 2 working sets on my next movement, which will be next. And then on my other back move, my other pull day, where I'm focused on my lats and not so much upper back, I do 10 sets. So I'm doing 19 to 20 sets, working sets of back work a week. And my back is recovering fine, and I'm in a diet where recovery normally fails. So do not be afraid to jack your volume up, especially on body parts like your back, because they can handle it. Finally here, I get into a seated cable row. This is the first week that I've done this movement. The handle that I'm using, I don't really know how I would describe it. Maybe like an exaggerated V handle. It's not like the traditional V handle that you would see on a cable row or that people use on a T-bar row, where it's really narrow. I don't like that handle at all. I feel like my shoulders are too broad for me to really get much of a contraction on it. So when I do a seated cable row, I always do a little bit of a wider grip. Now here's an angle from the back where you can see how I'm opening and contracting my scapula here at the top. So what I'm doing here on this particular movement is I'm doing 2 sets where I'm leaving a rep in the tank in the first set and then hitting 0 reps in reserve on the final set. And how I would progress this is very similar to what I was talking about with the bicep curls. Is I'm going to do this movement with this weight week after week until I get to the point where I hit 12 reps on both of the sets, and then I'll just add 5 pounds to the stack. So next we get into the arm work. I didn't record my first 2 working sets, just the third working set here. I'm doing a seated dumbbell hammer curl. From this angle you can really tell how bad my arms are, specifically my biceps. What I'm focusing on here on this movement is just keeping my body perfectly still, and then as I come down with the dumbbells, I'm actually flexing my tricep so that I know when I initiate the contraction, I'm initiating the contraction with my bicep and my brachialis. So this is a movement that I'm really including, obviously for bicep development, but more so brachialis development, something that would help on side shots when I'm on stage. So that was my final set there, where I'm doing 0 reps in reserve. I was leaving 1 rep in reserve on the first 2 sets. So here is a unilateral cable curl, which is kind of the opposite to the bilateral cable curl that I did at the beginning, where I'm doing just my left arm and then I'm doing my right arm. I am doing my left arm first because my left bicep is weaker than my right bicep in terms of appearance, and I'm trying to fix that symmetry problem. And then I follow it up with my right bicep, just mashing the reps that I get on my left bicep. So the main goal with this movement is I should be leaving this movement feeling the pump, so to say, in my left bicep more than I feel it in my right bicep, because I'm trying to obviously fix a symmetry problem. What you're gonna notice as I show the next clip when I go to the right arm of the cable bicep curl is you're gonna see that everything from my shoulder down to my hand is in a perfectly straight line. I'm just trying to keep the angle of force and the tension perfectly on the bicep muscle and nothing else. So if you were to pause the video right here, you could see from my shoulder all the way down to my hand is in a perfectly straight line. So I completely adjust my body to allow everything to be in a straight line so I can put the maximum amount of tension on my bicep. And I'm focused on keeping my upper arm, so my humerus, completely fixed. All I'm thinking about is flexing at the elbow, contracting as hard as I absolutely can at the top with my bicep, and then at the bottom, I'm having a slight pause in that stretched position. And I fully lengthen my arm. So my arm right here, not here, right there, and this position is at a perfect 180-degree angle, which is allowing the bicep muscle to fully lengthen all the way to the end. So I do 2 sets here on this unilateral cable curl, aiming for 15 reps on each side of the bicep curl. And once I get to the point where I do 15 reps on both sets, I'll just add 2.5 pounds and I will repeat as I aim to get stronger while keeping the form the same. And then my final movement on this particular pull day is reverse pec deck flies. So I do 3 sets here. I'm only showing the last 2 sets. So this is my second set where I leave a rep in the tank. What I want to focus on here is I want you guys, it's kind of hard to see through my shirt, but my scapula. So one thing that people really struggle with when they train their rear delts is they get way too much scapular movement. What happens is at the top of the movement here, if my scapula comes together, my shoulder blades squeeze together, I'm transferring the tension onto the rhomboids and part of my lower trap area on my upper back. What you want to do with your rear delt movements are you want to take the weight as far back as you can until you start to feel your scapula pinch together, and then at that point the range of motion is over. As we go into my final set here where I'm doing 0 reps in reserve, so it's kind of my failure point. You're going to see how I set up on this reverse pec deck to completely eliminate any cheating. All right, so here you can see I've got my feet back behind me, so there's absolutely no leg drive contributing to these reps at all. And this may be hard to see, but I actually have my forehead is planted against that support beam on the machine. So literally the only part of my body that is moving is my rear delts to contract the weight. I can't jerk my torso back to help me cheat because my head is planted onto the support beam, and I can't drive through my legs to help me cheat because I've taken my legs out of the movement by putting my feet back behind me. So I'm going to stick with the same weight for 3 sets here, leaving 1 rep in the tank on the first 2 sets and leaving 0 in the tank on my last set. Sticking with this weight until I can get 15 reps across all 3 sets, and then I will increase the weight by 5 pounds to progressively overload. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I can get more training videos in soon. This first one, the angles weren't that good. It's a little bit awkward to have to record your entire session. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment on the video or send me a DM on Instagram. Any suggestions for anything you want to see, go ahead and let me know too. And you guys go ahead and have a good one.